Tony Wright, and I sang for Terrorvision. Terrorvision have been going since the early 90s. We all met in Bradford, probably at a pub, either the, I don't know, Wheat Sheaf Vaults Bar or the Frog and Toad, maybe the Beer Keller. And yeah, that's how we sort of started. We'd all played in different bands, and all came together under the name of Spoilt Brats. We got signed after sending a demo off to a record label called Peaceville, and we got a response back from a guy called Al Rhodes who said it's the worst thing he'd ever heard, not to bother him again. And then a fortnight later he rang and apologised, and we managed to get loads and loads of free beer out of him by meeting up every other week to talk about a deal, starting with, I don't know, a 5-album deal to Major Records, which was his little label. So he bought us all a pint to try and get us to sign in the Birdcage Bar, Bradford, and we said at the end of it, no, you're alright. So he rang us that next same week, says, right, meet you again at the Birdcage Bar, 4-album deal. So again, we all had a few beers on Al. After 3 albums, 2 albums, 1 album, we got to an EP, at which point he said, can't really do that, but I'll manage you. So if you let us manage you, I'll get you a proper record deal. And that's what we did. So at that point, he got Chrysalis Records to demo some tracks for us, and then he got East West and EMI. So it started a bidding war really, which was quite good. And we ended up signing to EMI. EMI said, is there anything in particular that you'd like, you know, one thing or another. There's a few bits and pieces we had to sort out, like some money, but also, what else did we need? Oh, that's it, we needed our own record label, because when I looked at their roster for rock bands at the moment, at that time, sorry, it was quite cringeworthy. It was not a lot of youth and quite a lot of embarrassment really. And so yeah, we'd started Total Vegas Recordings, which was our record label.
Tick, tock, tick.
I think Al came up with the idea from a phrase that we used to say, saying that's totally Vegas. So it meant it was good. So if something was Vegas, it was good. If it was totally Vegas, it was really good. So we started Total Vegas Recordings, and at that point we went and recorded Formaldehyde, which was our debut album, which was pretty much a lot of the tracks that we'd demoed to get the record deal. And yeah, I think that one spawned, I don't know, My House, Problem Solved. Don't even know if Pain Reliever were on that one. But yeah, they were the first ones, and we brought out the Thrive EP, which had a picture of a frog in a Venus flytrap on the cover of it. So that was our first soiree, is that the right word? Foray, maybe, into making records. After that lot, it we'd done alright. We hadn't got dropped basically, and we'd not been the most obedient, but if we had got dropped it didn't matter, because we'd filled our cupboards with samples of pretty much every band on EMI, except for the dodgy rock bands that we talked about to start with. So we could have managed to survive just on the sale of what was the new CD, yeah. Because when we first brought out records, there were records as well as CDs. I think we even brought out a cassette, not a twin cassette, but just a cassette. Yeah, that was quite good actually. It was quite good. And then we said, right, what do you want to do for your second album? Our A&R guy at the time, Nick Mander, introduced us to some different people. Butch Vig, being in the sort of pool of people we could choose from, but he'd just done Nirvana's Nevermind, so we couldn't really use him because he was on his way to superstardom and probably forming garbage at the time. That was the band everything else, I don't say what he did was garbage, because it was brilliant. We also listened to a guy who recorded the Pixies, called Gil Norton, great guy from Liverpool. At which point we says there's a great studio in New York, so we all went off to New York for a few months, lived at the Chelsea Hotel, I remember it well. It's where that's the line in the Leonard Cohen song. It's where Sid killed Nancy, it's where Arthur C. Clarke wrote Space Oddity or whatever it was called, 2001, and yeah, it was good time. I think you can hear the experience we were having on the record. I think you can hear how excited we were. I think, you know, you can hear that we wanted to do our best because we were in this wonderful place, and you know, the rest of that was out of history. I don't know how many singles came off that, but it was a ridiculous amount of singles. Unfortunately, around that time, you know, radio didn't really rock. Kerrang was a good magazine. After first ventures into Kerrang before we were signed, being the worst band in the world according to some of the people there, we then went on to win quite a few of the awards, and they accepted that what we're doing was slightly different to all them bands that were the reason why we'd got Total Vegas, and people caught on to what Terrorvision were about. It was good fun, it was alternative, it was in your face, and it was a good time to be in Terrorvision. The pre-production for the record, Gil came up to our mill, well I say our mill, a room in a mill, and we sat there and we had songs like Oblivion. Obviously at that point a producer comes along and says, I really like this song, but what else can you do, what else can you do? And they take it apart. It's like having a car that you take apart and rebuild, and you keep taking it apart and rebuilding it, and sometimes you customise it, sometimes it looks wrong, sometimes it looks right, and then we stuck a doo-wop in it, and it was just, people understood, people put their hands in the air. Yeah, you know, Pretend Best Friend, it was good. The record, when it came out, it did well, and it did more well than it did better, and it sort of meant, in some ways it was great because life became easy, but when life's easy you quite often find that there's not quite as much stuff to write about, I suppose. You know, you can write about the great times, but I think living in the real world, which it sort of took us out of the real world quite a bit, it means it's hard to write about things that people can identify with. I think you need a bit of graft in your life, you need a bit of hard work, you need these experiences as well. But I think when you haven't got the world at your feet, when you're hanging from your fingertips by it and trying to climb on, I think that helps with the songwriting process. So in some ways it affects you brilliant, because like suddenly life's easy and the bank letters better than the bank letters that you used to get. But you know, it's suddenly you've got this responsibility to write the next great album, and you realise that that responsibility is yours, and yet someone who isn't as passionate or care about it as much as you might be the person that reviews it, who just doesn't get it, and they might be someone who's looking for the safety of a sound they've heard before, anyway. And so you're never going to get a look in, really, and yet that's who people look to. That's the boundary, the border, the blockage between a band and the people who come and see bands and support bands. You know, I'm always aware of the fact from that time that the greatest band in the world probably haven't been discovered yet, and probably because of people just taking the easy route, really, and saying, yeah, these are great because they sound like what I liked last year. You know, I suppose record labels did that when you looked at who was signed when we signed to EMI. They never, you know, they'd gone out and found Led Zeppelin once, and then instead of going out and finding Led Zeppelin again, and when I say that, I mean what Led Zeppelin stood for, breaking boundaries and stuff like that. I suppose the Prodigy were my next Led Zeppelin, but everyone went out and signed bands that sounded like Led Zeppelin, and it's like, why would you do that? Why don't you do the proper work and, you know, go and find Led Zeppelin? I like the Prodigy though. When they came out, I thought they were cracking, and they were out around the same time. I remember playing Glastonbury. I've still got my Doc Martens that they gave me from Glastonbury, and yeah, I remember sitting on the actually on the stage while Prodigy played, with my back against their backdrop. I'm watching them from behind. I think I'd had a few too many sherries or whatever, and I remember the DJ's desk or something, whatever it was. I don't understand that big instrument that he was stood up playing. That broke down, and they all went off, and I stayed there for a while on my own, and then I thought, better leave. Sloped off, got backstage, jumped in a van, drove to airport, flew to Germany for a festival. It was good. It was good. When I listen back to that record now, I love it. I love that record. I love everything Terrorvision did. I like Shaving Peaches because it wasn't what people expected, and we didn't need to write another How to Make Friends and Influence People. What was the point? I like Good to Go because it was kind of raw. I like Super Deluxe, the last album Terrorvision did. But you know, when you've been together that long, that was your home, that was your family, and we'd sort of been together for all them years and reached an age where your natural thing is to leave home, and we all wanted to leave home, I think, and go out into the world and venture, find our new inspirations, rather than just become a parody of ourselves, rather than do the same thing again and again. You know, even though the offer there is there, the money's good and everything, you have a duty to push boundaries. We're playing a rock band, you know what I mean? We weren't in a shoegazing band, we weren't in a boy band. We were good, every times were great. So yeah, I look back at it with fond memories. I'm glad we moved on. I'm so proud to say that we did, but I'm so proud to say that we also made that record at that time and had some great times with it. So this is Tony Wright of Terrorvision, Like a Dog, Acoustic TV, and of Tony Wright, signing out. Thanks y'all, and see you later.